Yes, guys, what's going on? Sham here from Be Real TV. So, there's a young 27-year-old man. He's tall, he's in shape, and he's been married to his missus for about a few years. And he's in bed with her. He looks at her in the eye and he says, "Darling, tell me, how do you feel about the physical intimacy between us?" So she looks back at him in his eyes with a slight little smirk on her face and she says, "It's alright." So he's completely dumbfounded by this answer and he feels this sense of adrenaline, this slight cortisol pump go through his body. He's not at ease. He jumps out of bed and he gets onto his laptop and he starts searching. He needs assistance. He's on the internet and he's searching. And as he's searching, he comes across the sexual master, the master of disaster. He comes across Stirling Cooper. He gets in contact with Stirling. He's like, "Oh, wise one. Oh, master of disaster, teach me the ways of the force. Help me to become a sexual beast. Help me to become a sexual tyrannosaurus." What do you tell that young gentleman?
Damn, that's an interesting introduction and a very good question. Whew. All right. Well, first of all, it's good to meet you.
Thank you for joining us.
27-year-old guy in a relationship, and she doesn't like. She's not enjoying the intimacy. We have to break it down. We have to figure out. We have to like the analogy I like to use with this sort of stuff. Right. Imagine if you were walking around and you had a pebble in your shoe,
Mm-hmm.
and you start feeling a pain in your foot
Yeah.
because there's a pebble in your shoe. Most guys' answer to this is going to be some kind of band-aid solution. Like, maybe he thinks, oh, if I pop a little blue pill, I'll be able to go a little bit longer all night. Maybe give her a bit more satisfaction.
Yeah.
That is the equivalent of, you got a pebble in your shoe, you're walking around with some pain in your foot because of that, and I give you an aspirin
Mm-hmm.
instead of taking your shoe off and getting rid of the pebble.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of finding what the root cause of the problem is, right? So, what could the root cause of that problem be? Is it because he's not lasting long enough in bed with her to allow her to reach climax?
Mm-hmm.
Is it he's not performing at all? He's not able to rise to the occasion,
Mm-hmm.
shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that he doesn't understand her body well enough and what buttons to push on her body?
Yeah.
Is it because he doesn't understand her the erotic side of the female psyche
Yeah.
and isn't able to tap into that kind of deeper subconscious level that can really, really arouse a woman? So we've got to start breaking it down and figuring out exactly what the problem is.
So it's not a one shoe fits all approach. It depends on the person, where they're lacking, and but you mentioned that there's no blue pill, there's no special pill you can take there. But I've heard you mention a miraculous shake called, listen to this, it's called the boner shake. So what is in that and what does it do?
It's super simple, bro. It's just like 4 raw eggs, a scoop of vanilla protein powder, and some water.
Did you invent that or was that invested by Rocky Balboa?
I think Rocky invented that. But it worked for him. It works for me. It works for every other guy I give it to.
So what else you put in it? Raw eggs and...
That's what I put. That's all I
That's
put.
it.
I just put raw eggs. I put the vanilla protein in there for taste.
Yeah.
Water, and then blitz it up, and it tastes like a milkshake when you put vanilla protein in it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just tastes like raw eggs.
Yeah.
It can be a bit gooey. It helps if you don't get like. Most guys are like, no way I'm gonna eat that because you get like the little gooey bit. And it's like, ugh. But if you get like a stick blender and you really blitz it up, you'll be good. And you slam that down like 2-3 hours before you go to bed. Next morning, you're gonna wake up with morning wood like you were a 14-year-old. It's gonna be just like you were young again.
It's interesting because when we were younger, when I used to train doing through the bro science methods, I used to put some raw eggs into a blender. My brother taught me this. Shout out to my brother who gave me this advice and was really taking the chances with that salmonella poisoning. I'd be putting the putting in the raw eggs and I'd mix in some chocolate protein powder into there, blend it up and knock it. But it never did me any harm. My body adjusted to it, and I think if I did it, I think when you start it, you may get the runs a little bit. Your stomach might be upset, but you will adjust eventually. I think.
I've had dudes ask me that, like, am I not going to get salmonella poisoning? I've never had any issue with that. Like, I've never heard of anyone getting like salmonella poisoning from like eggs,
Yeah.
but like chicken, yeah. But I've never heard of anyone getting poisoned from like raw eggs, unless the egg's off. So just don't make sure the egg isn't off. Like put it in some water, see if it like. I think there's a test you can do. Does it float or drop, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
That's easy. If it's full of gas, it's probably going to float. I think that means it's off. If it sinks, it's. I don't know what the test is, but there's a test you can do with a cup of water in that egg.
Go to ChatGPT, find out.
Find that out, and then don't use that egg. And then you won't get salmonella. That seems like a really obvious solution. But
right, so Sterling, we're in London. We are next door, believe it or not. We are literally pretty much next door to Buckingham Palace. I heard a rumor going around, circulating as I was coming here, that there is a young gentleman in shape and he's come to give King Charles some advice in the bedroom. So
did you not see the sign on the door? I'm now the Duke of Cambridge.
Oh wow! So Sterling representing in London. So what brings you to London, Sterling?
I got appointed to be the Duke of Cambridge, and now I'm taking up my position. No, just here hanging out with you, hanging out with a couple of other podcasters out here, doing a little bit of work before I bounce to Ireland for some family time.
Yes, guys, Sham here from Be Real TV. I am very sorry for interrupting your video. Just do me a quick favor. Click the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And please go to the bell notification icon and set it to all. YouTube does not seem to want to pump my videos to my subscribers. I work very hard on this platform and I would very much appreciate if you just did them two things to support me.
So Sterling, why don't we dive into a little bit about yourself? Who is Stirling Cooper? Why is Stirling Cooper famous? Why does he have thousands of followers online? Who is Stirling Cooper?
It's a very good question. I'm trying to figure that out myself. So my background is a bit controversial. I used to be in the adult entertainment industry.
Okay.
I was, an actor in that industry for about 5 years. I retired about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I was in that space, performing under pressure, you could say.
Yeah.
And I take that experience, along with a lot of experience from my more personal side of my life, to trying to help men now to overcome any of these issues they have in the bedroom, overcome things like erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, performance anxiety, and bringing their partner to pleasure.
Okay.
So I can pull from a few different unique experiences that the average guy can't, and across a large spectrum of females. So I've learned what things are very, very similar.
Yep.
Across that spectrum of women, and what things are not that similar.
Yep.
So it makes it easier for you to sort of pinpoint. Oh, most women are going to enjoy this kind of thing. Most women are going to enjoy that. Most women are going to enjoy this. These things and these things. Okay, play with some caution. Be careful here. There's more room for error here.
Yeah.
And so I can take all that advice and basically apply it to the average guy. And if a dude comes to me, he's like, "Oh man, I'm a bit nervous with my new girlfriend." Don't worry. Like we can fix you. That's fine. That's easy. You try doing that with cameramen and lights and someone saying action.
Since we're on the topic, Sterling, just in case there are some young men watching there, because I think the vast majority of my viewers are males between the ages of 25 and 40. How do they get in contact with you, and what would you give to them?
I mean, the best place to find me is my website, stirlingcooper.com, or you can find me on YouTube at Stirling Cooper. And you can literally send me a direct email. I check my email every day. Unless it's a customer service related thing, then my assistant does it. But you can hit me up there. You can hit me up on my Instagram. Hit me up on Twitter. I check all my DMs all the time. But it's I do get a lot of them.
So let's
be patient with it.
let's break this down. Let's go through a case study. So obviously it's generic, but maybe you can think of an example and apply it. If a young gentleman comes up to you, contacts you, what is your process? What is every business has a process from start to finish. What is your process?
Yeah, well, it depends what he comes to me with, right? So I'll like I said before, I'll try to break down and find the root cause, because a lot of guys will come to me and they'll ask questions that are a bit too vague. They're like, "Hey man, normally I have no problem getting getting a boner with a woman, but with this new girl, I couldn't get it up. What's my problem?" Okay, well, I need to get more information out of you in order to elicit the exact cause of the problem. Okay. Because there's multiple things it could be. Is it a dietary thing? Is it a hormonal thing? Is it purely a mental thing? Okay, so what's your diet been like since then? How is this a brand? What was the time difference between like all these previous experiences and her? Has your diet been screwed up in the meantime? Has your testosterone tanked in that meantime? Have you not been doing your cardio? So is your cardiovascular system ruined? So your blood flow isn't as strong, so you can't get it up as much? Or is it a case of you put this woman on a pedestal, you see her in a different way that you've seen all these other women, and that is getting on your nerves and it's getting into your head and causing you to be too anxious in the act of during the arousal.
So how much is psychological and how much is physical?
It's at least 50-50, at least, if not more. Because here's an interesting thing to consider. So the little blue pill that most guys will leap to when they're first having problems with getting a boner. That doesn't give you an erection. That helps you maintain one for longer. It helps with the blood flow side of things, the physical side of things. The funny thing is that a lot of guys will take that and they'll take it in a scenario when it's actually a mental problem that's causing their issue.
Okay.
And they'll take the little blue pill and nothing happens. They're sitting there still with pushing rope and nothing's working. They're like, I took the magic pill. Why isn't this working? This is supposed to work.
Yeah.
But it's not working because this is what gives you arousal. It starts up here in the brain above everything else. And without that on board, if your brain isn't on board, your body will never be on board. So your mind has first choice. The mind decides first, are we going to play this game or not? And then the body can follow suit. But if the mind isn't on board, then the body cannot possibly work. So you have to fix the mental side of things has to be treated first before we look at anything that's physical. And that means, okay, is he too anxious? Is he too nervous? Is he putting her on a pedestal too much? Is he putting too much pressure on himself to perform? Is he putting too much pressure on himself to achieve a certain outcome? That might be, I want to make sure she has an amazing, mind-blowing time. And so that puts a lot of pressure on himself as a young man to perform, and maybe he can't live up to those expectations he's put on himself. So kind of ironically, a lot of the time, one of the first things I'll prescribe to a guy in that situation is something I call the selfish pervert frame of mind.
Okay, what's that?
So it's a kind of a mix of these two different personas. So the selfish mentality of I'm going to engage and do things in this act of sex that I find enjoyable for my own pleasure. And there's the kind of perverted side of things where it's like almost like she is your sexual muse.
Okay.
She is like an inspiration for that fire and that vigor inside of you. You're tapping into that more primal side of you, but you're also combining it with that sort of selfish side to a little bit, right? What that allows you to actually do is it allows you to dissociate from the idea of performing, dissociate from the idea of needing a certain outcome, dissociate from that pressure, give yourself the freedom to just be in the moment, be present, and enjoy it. And ironically enough, when a man is enjoying himself and present, really truly present with his partner, she actually enjoys it a lot more than the guy who is, say, doing things to desperately try to please her, to appease his own ego. Because a woman can tell instantly if a guy needs her to orgasm, needs her to finish. If it's his entire self-esteem and self-worth is wrapped up in that outcome, women feel that and pick up on that instantly. And what that does as well is that puts a woman in her head and it makes her self-conscious and it puts pressure on her, and so we have the same problem all over again. Now she is in her head and she cannot possibly get to that point of climax either. So it's this weird, like we're kind of playing mind games on ourselves deliberately to kind of free our mind and free the shackles that our mind tends to have over us in all of these sort of high pressure scenarios.
It's interesting because this relates back to something I heard you talking about on another talk, that when you had these great emperors like the likes of Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Darius, and so on and so forth, and they were to return home after a long battle to the woman that they love, how would they treat that woman? Would they? And this is why I said in the beginning, I use very specific words there, sexual tyrannosaurus, right? Because a tyrannosaurus does not treat the woman that he is sleeping with necessarily gently. Like you said, it's consensual,
Yep.
but not with that gentle touch.
Not like
Could you elaborate a little bit?
Not like she's a delicate flower, like a fragile little princess. Women can and enjoy very physical, dominant, passionate
Yes.
lovemaking, and that's the analogy I like to use. Yeah, like you're a Roman legionnaire, you're off fighting the Germanic tribes for years and years and years, and you finally come home to your Roman bride. How would you make love to her? It's not going to be lovey-dovey, like candles and rose petals, sprinkled around the bedroom. It's going to be passionate. It's going to be fiery. It's going to be, lustful. It's going to be insatiable. These are the kinds of verbs we would use to describe it. And I think every man kind of understands what I'm talking about, the kind of sex I'm talking about when we use this language.
Fiery, passionate.
Yeah. I like the Tyrannosaurus. I'm going to steal that.
Tyrannosaurus, yeah.
Except he can't use his arms. He's just.
Do you want to know where I got that from? Where I remember this, there was have you seen Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's that guy who's chewing on the sort of, I think it's tobacco, and they're in the helicopter, and he goes, "This shit will make you a sexual Tyrannosaurus."
I know that line. Yeah.
I think that's what it was, and
Yeah,
I remembered
yeah.
that. I remember that. Yeah, so okay, let's dive a little bit more into this area over here. So these people that I just mentioned here, Alexander the Great and these conquerors, they had multiple women. Is there a difference, and is there a sort of does performance increase if people have more women due to testosterone, or can it harm it, having this sort of one-nightus element where somebody's absolutely obsessed with one woman? How does that play a role in the bedroom?
It's interesting. What I actually get a lot of guys who are in long-term like marriages or very, very long-term girlfriend situations, and they'll come to me and they'll say, "How do I keep that spark going?"
Yeah,
that we had at the beginning, that what you might call like the honeymoon phase,
the passion
that you had at the very, very beginning, and now they're with a woman that they do truly, truly love, but that passion might have died off a little bit. It's like, well, how do I re-spark that? And on the guy's side of things, assuming she is still interested in him and she still respects him and she still loves him, that's very important, because if that isn't the case, if the lack of passion and sex is coming from her end, then that's an entirely different problem to fix. She has to fundamentally respect that man again, to be wanting to sleep with him. But let's say on his side of things, he isn't as enamored with her sexually as he once was. Well, what are the things he can do? I think, again, there's this weird sort of complex that tends to happen in men's brains, which you can call the Madonna whore complex.
Okay.
Where they want the Madonna to be the mother of their kids, and I'm not talking about Madonna the artist. I'm talking about the traditional use of the word Madonna, like the painting, like the Virgin Bride.
Okay.
That's the traditional use of the word Madonna. Yeah. So they want the Madonna to be the mother of their kids, but they lust after the whore, like the sexuality of the whore. And I think to a large degree, at the very beginning of relationships, men will see a woman more on that, not literally in that sense, but more on that lust side.
Yeah, in the early phases.
They'll view her more as a sexual object, which is not an insult. But then as the love progresses and he learns about her more, gets a lot more respect for her, like they develop a long-term relationship, now she moves more into that Madonna, that wife, that long-term, that partner mentality in his brain. And it's hard for a guy to switch between those two. Like in the bedroom, once after a long enough period of time, he stops seeing her as this sexual object. And so the key is he has to get his brain back into that kind of primal, lusty mentality to start seeing her again as a sexual object. And maybe that involves trying a few new things in the bedroom. Maybe that involves sitting down and communicating with her and saying, hey, like I'm keen on trying like this and this and this. Like I think we've added a bit of spice into the relationship, or just being spontaneous and like taking her on a more emotional kind of a roller coaster of a journey, rather than the typical, oh, it's Friday night, it's date night, it's missionary position with the lights off for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And because men will do that. Men will fall into a bedroom routine with our partners
We're creatures of habit, aren't we?
because we're creatures of habit. And that is actually the death. That's where the bedroom death starts, I think, is men falling into that habitual, okay, I'm going to do this position, then I'm that position, then we're going to finish. Okay, well, like that's all well and good, and you'll get your rocks off, but know that will eventually lead to a decline in the passion. So it's another one of your jobs as a man, but that's welcome to the world of being a man. You have to inject a bit of spontaneity and a bit of creativity and a bit more passion deliberately into your sexual interactions with your wife and your girlfriend to keep that spark going and to keep her on her toes a bit, to keep her thinking, oh, what's he going to do next? What's going to happen next? I don't know. It's unpredictable. That keeps her in a really, really good place where she can still love and respect that man in the bedroom too.
Interesting. It's something that I feel with women, going back to our earlier conversation, that treating them like a rose petal is going to give off a feministic energy from yourself.
Yep.
And obviously, first of all, let's just clarify this. Everything has to be consensual. But tricks that I've been told about is that when you are with a woman, if you grab her hand, for example, you don't have to put too much power into it, but that slight extra grip, that slight extra strength, she will pick up on that. And that slight handling of her will help you to get the juices flowing, per se. Right? Is that genuine? Is that the case? Is that you do have to be a bit physical? You do have to show your strength a little bit?
Yeah, I think you do, because it's why is a woman attracted to a man? She's attracted to a man because he's stronger than her, because he can protect her, he can provide for her, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the providing side of things is, the monetary, the status side of a guy, but the protection is really a physical thing.
Okay.
And that's why big, strong men have always been more attractive to women than scrawny men. That's just obvious for everybody. But it's because of the physical protection aspect that he can, and the way that men communicate that to a woman on a kind of deeper psychological level in a non-verbal way is with that physical kind of dominance in the bedroom.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Doesn't mean it's not consensual. It's 100% consensual. Doesn't mean you're hurting her in any way. But it's showing. Maybe it's simple as moving her around, leading, controlling her body. Right? You're the one who moves her legs where you want her legs to go. You're the one who moves her hands and her arms where you want them to go.
Take that leadership role.
Exactly. That's our natural role as the male, and women respond incredibly well to that. They, like, I've coached guys who've been in like long-term marriages, and they've said to me, "Look, we were having our sexual life wasn't terrible. But we were having our regular sex life, and then I started taking control and leading a bit more like this, being a bit more dominant like this, and you could see her eyes light up from it. It's like, yes, finally, he's taking control like this. Finally, he's giving her the kind of sex she wants, which is." And to dive into like the female psychology of this for a second. So when the man is leading and being a bit more dominant like this, right? It allows her to naturally fall into her natural submissive feminine polarity.
Okay.
Because you're falling into your natural masculine dominant polarity. That's the way we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So by showing her that you're that strong guy, again, you're not trying to hurt her in any way, but you're just controlling and leading that, right? That allows her to actually relax, ironically enough. By being more physical and dominant like that, she is able to relax and be more calm and feel more safe with you, which makes the sexual experience all the more enjoyable for her.
I've got a question for you. You don't just deal with men who are in long-term relationships. You're also dealing with people who are having short-term relationships, flings, and so on and so forth. Now, if a woman, because you mentioned that, you're not trying to hurt her, but there are some women out there, they want to be hurt a little bit, right?
That's true.
What do you advise to men when they're in that situation and a woman is saying to them clearly, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and inflict a bit of pain on them? Obviously, that could work against them, right, as well?
In today's day and age, yeah, there's there's hearsay, there's potential legal stuff that's going on there. It depends how extreme she is talking. If we're talking about a few spanks on the butt here and there, that's not a big deal. If we're talking about pulling a girl's hair here and there, that ain't that big a deal.
Yeah.
Some women want things that are a bit more extreme than that. That's absolutely true. And to give guys a bit of a context as to like the reasoning why, again, it's a similar psychologically, it's a similar thing. Like I just talked about, like the dominance and the masculine polarity and the feminine submissive polarity.
Yeah.
But there's another interesting thing there about pain, and this is the reason why a significant portion of women will fantasize about things relating to like BDSM.
Okay.
Is pain, oddly enough, actually wakes the body up and amplifies pleasure through like, let's say spanking. Let's just as one example, if you're spanking a woman, that actually brings more blood flow into the body. It wakes the body up, like wakes the body's nervous system up a lot more, which then makes things like the clitoris a lot more sensitive. So there is actually a biological like reason why women tend to enjoy things like that some degree you might classify as pain. Yeah, so there could be spanks, hair pulling, maybe consensual, correct choking technique, which is not applying pressure to the windpipe at all. You're not trying to restrict airflow. It's actually about applying pressure on the sides of the neck to restrict blood flow to the head.
Yeah.
There's subtleties to this stuff.
Okay, right, okay.
But these are all forms of that like pain, which actually creates more pleasure for her. Yeah. I want to add something else you mentioned before about the multiple women thing. I saw this quote recently, which I really, really liked. And have you ever heard of the Coolidge effect?
I have heard of it. I can't remember what it is. But...
So the Coolidge effect is, I might bastardize the story a little bit, but basically, President Coolidge, he was an American president.
Okay.
And he was touring a chicken farm. And he went up to the farmer and he said, "How many times a day does that rooster have sex?" And the farmer turned to him and said, "Oh, he has sex hundreds of times a day." And Mrs. Coolidge piped him and she said, "Well, make sure you tell Mr. Coolidge that." As in, he's not. She's implying he's not giving her enough, right?
With a smirk on the face.
With a smirk on the face. And then the President Coolidge said to the farmer, "Okay, but is he having sex with the same chicken?" "Oh, no," said the farmer. "He's having sex with like 50 different chickens." Tell that to Mrs. Coolidge. So the idea is, the Coolidge effect is the number of different, in like a single day or whatever. They've done this test on rats. It's always done on chickens. The number of different partners that animal has in a day is directly correlated to like how quickly they would climax or how excited they are. So if on let's say sexual incidents 1, 2, 3 are going to be like exciting if there was different partners, but if it's with the same partner, it's going to be episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. The excitement is going to decline. And the interest in repeated sexual intercourse with that same partner is going to decline. But it's not. It's going to increase or stay the same if it's with different partners.
Right. Okay. So, Sterling, I'm a Muslim, and as Muslims, we believe that men can have multiple wives. Okay. Now, there are rules to the game. You can't just go and, grab 2, 3, 4 wives just like that. There are rules, but you are allowed to have multiple wives. So is what you're telling me here that if men have multiple wives, in a sexual sense, they will be able to keep their wives more happier because they will have a more intricate, passionate bond because they're not with the same woman over and over again?
Yeah, biologically that is what it plays out. Yeah, it's I think the Muslims got it very, very correct with that prescription, man. Because like, having the multiple wives, and I know you guys don't. As far as I'm aware, at least, there's never anything happening like in a group sense. It's a one-on-one time. But it does the same thing biologically to a man. It's like, okay, you can maintain the passion amongst all of your wives because you have all of the wives. It actually helps to maintain the passion longer, like indefinitely, because there's more than one wife there. So it keeps you in that state of peak interest and excitement as a man sexually. So it actually works in like in your favor. And I think whenever I've talked about this with women, they've kind of thought like, oh, if he isn't, if I have to share my husband with another woman, he's not going to love me as much. It's actually biologically it appears to be the complete opposite, at least on a sex drive sense. He is going to want you more. He's less likely to get bored of you in the bedroom because there is a constant bit of variety he has access to.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
True, and I think she will appreciate him and his presence a lot more.
Yeah.
Because now it is more valuable because there is a degree of competition and it is not like exclusive to her. Now, a lot of women will have trouble kind of compartmentalizing and rational and accepting this, but I just think I think it's just a male nature. I really don't think that there's anything wrong with the way Muslims prescribe multiple wives. I think it's a fantastic thing actually, but yeah, especially in the West, a lot of women have trouble kind of wrap their head around it.
In the East as well, I think now as well.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So, Stanley, let's dive a little bit more about you. Do you still do anything in the adult industry?
No, I retired 3 years ago.
I saw some movies, not to put you in the spot here, but on IMDb that was starring you.
I have an IMDb for some reason. Some fan made it, and he put me in credits for a couple of things. I think they might have been adult roles. But I don't know why he picked. There was like 2 or 3 that he picked, and I don't know why he picked them.
But you're not doing anything anymore.
No. But apparently, I have an IMDb. Yeah, which I didn't create. Someone else created it.
So, what was that life like for you, and how has life altered? What got you out of it?
COVID got me out of it, oddly enough, and it was COVID and like getting questions from guys like in the DMs and stuff like, "Hey man, I'm having trouble with erectile dysfunction. Hey, how do I last longer?" Questions like this because COVID happened. The industry stopped shooting for several months.
Yeah.
So income went to zero.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay. And actually, at the time, I'd already been writing my first book.
Mm-hmm.
I was like halfway through it. I've been writing for like 6 months still and procrastinating on it.
Yeah. It's
and
difficult.
then that kind of like that was the moment of like, oh well, I better get this done now because I need to pay rent and I need to find another source of income. So I finished this book and I published it and I got it out there. Ebooks, I pushed it out onto the internet. And I also recognized that there was this demand from guys to fix these kind of sexual problems, and especially a lot of young guys because they're actually consuming way too much pornography, which is actually causing the problem. So to a large degree, like I will absolutely admit that I was part of the problem that these guys I caused inadvertently caused this problem in a lot of guys. So it's my job to fix it. I have to fix it. I freaking contributed to the problem in the first place, So
did that have any impact on you mentally, and does it have any impact on you mentally? How do you feel about it?
I mean, it drives me to fix it. It drives me to help guys.
Do you regret it?
I can't say I regret it because I wouldn't be in the position I'm in now. If I didn't do it, then I wouldn't. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't be in a position to have learned the things I've learned, so I couldn't teach the things I teach. Would I recommend it to anybody? Absolutely not. I wouldn't recommend it as a profession. I wouldn't recommend it as a career choice. I don't recommend it as a hobby to consume either. I don't recommend it in any way really. Do I think? I don't think it. I think now in its current form, like in terms of like mass free, readily available on your mobile phone, adult content, it is extremely damaging to society and to young men especially. In terms of their mental health, their discipline, their drive, their motivation, their sexual relationships, their relationships with women in general. But do I think that it had that? I don't think pornography in and of itself was that anywhere near as damaging to society when it was a dirty magazine that you could pick up in like a sex toy store or something.
Yeah.
Because it's just so pervasive and it's everywhere now. And it used to be when I was growing up, it was exclusively for adults. Like you had to be 18 to get the magazine at the supermarket, at the newsagents, or
there were barriers to entry.
There was barrier to entry, right? And now there's zero barrier to entry because it's on everyone's phone and it's everywhere. So there's multiple layers of problems built into that thing, which is like mobile phones and mass social media, and I think internet pornography is like the logical end conclusion problem to all of that. Really, it's like the worst part of it. But
So let's talk about a few of the problems with pornography since we're on the topic. So there was a study which took place where 20% of the students reported severe levels of depression, anxiety, and stress related to pornography. Another study in America found that men who watch pornography feel lonelier, more insecure, and dissatisfied with their personal appearance. So let's touch on this part over here. Dissatisfied with their personal appearance. When you're watching another male on your device, and the same way if a woman watched it, and when women, they see these women on Instagram, there's a beauty standard that is developed. And you can see over here, this study found a lack of satisfaction with male appearance, and having to measure up to what I would imagine are elites on that level.
Yeah, I mean, like most of the guys in the industry are pretty physically fit.
Packing.
Yeah, packing downstairs. Yeah. They tend to be above average downstairs,
Yeah.
which would obviously
Distort your worldview.
distort your impression of exactly like what's average and what's normal. Absolutely. And I think some of the things you mentioned there was relating to like depression and
Loneliness,
and
insecurity.
yeah. I mean, I think all that comes down like the depression and the loneliness and the insecurity. I think that ties in very, very heavily with the effect that porn has on our dopamine circuitry. I think there's been some studies that show that porn usage is more like, or as equivalently as addictive as things like heroin and cocaine.
It stimulates the same part of the brain.
Yeah,
The frontal lobe. Let's go into this, right? So the frontal lobe is responsible for decisions and thinking logically, and this is one of the main areas which pornography impacts.
Yep.
I was just looking into that. It's very interesting, and it elicits the same types of feelings from dopamine and heroin, I believe.
Yeah. So dopamine isn't like, people think that dopamine is the happy feel good chemical. That's not true. Dopamine is the chemical it's like the reward chemical. It's what your brain gives you for pursuing a goal. So the way our brain was designed was, here's how dopamine was supposed to work. Oh, I want to build a house. So I get like every day I work over the course of a month, every time I put up a door or a window or I construct this building.
Yeah.
Every little step of the way, my brain is giving me a bit of dopamine because I'm pursuing my goal. I'm pursuing it. I'm working towards it. I'm pursuing it. It's rewarding me. It's giving me drive and motivation to keep me going.
Yeah.
And then eventually I finish the goal. Cool. The dopamine stops, and I have to find a new goal and pursue that. You could think about women as a goal. Like pursuing a woman is a goal. Like seducing a woman, getting her out on a date, attracting her, getting into a relationship with her, getting married to her. These are all like part of a goal, and I think any man who's ever walked up to a pretty girl at a bar has kind of felt that like a little bit of a reward of.
It's boring now. If your people, it's boring now. And this, sorry to cut you off, but I have to say this. I have to say my piece. Going back a few years ago, I'm talking like I'm a lot older, but going back a few years ago when I was in university, should I say, I just used to go, my friends will vouch for this, I used to go from this table to that table to that table, and I just used to randomly speak to different girls for no other reason than just to have a laugh. And I enjoyed that pursuit more. And if I knew that I could obtain that girl, often the time I'd get disinterested at that point, just because, and that was the pursuit. And nowadays, we were talking off camera, you have a lot of guys who will post on Instagram, keep the sunglasses on, they've got a nice car, and that's about it. But when you see that person in real life and they have to actually go and speak to a woman, but not just a woman, right? Men as well. They don't have that ability anymore because everything's moved online. So that pursuit has finished, and I do agree that was the fun part of it was the pursuit. And that's been eradicated through social media and access to pornography on your devices as well.
Exactly, yeah. So you get that. When you masturbate, when you fap, you get that little bit of dopamine, and you're overloading your dopamine circuitry, your dopamine receptors. You need more and more stimulus to create the same response, to elicit the same chemical response in the brain. So what that leads to is it means that dopamine does not have as big of an effect on you when it comes to drive and motivation. So of course you're going to be depressed and low self-esteem when you have no drive and no motivation.
Mhm.
These things are all tied together. Like men's self-esteem is derived from their ability to create and pursue things,
Pursue.
right? To achieve goals. That's where we get our self-esteem from. So that's where healthy self-esteem.
Motivation, yeah.
That's where healthy self-esteem comes from, is from pursuing and accomplishing goals.
Yeah.
So when your dopamine receptors are not firing properly because they're desensitized, okay, well, no wonder you don't feel like hitting the gym. No wonder you don't feel like building your business anymore. You know, these things have very negative consequences, like real world consequences.
So, Sterling, I have another curious question to ask you here. I've seen you talk about how people need to come off pornography and masturbating, and you said that it needs to be done slowly. Eventually, correct me if I'm misquoting you, but going from videos to photographs, from photographs to reading stories, and then eventually slowly cutting off. Question for you though: men have always had the ability to be able to masturbate. Pornography has obviously become more available, but my question here is masturbating very bad for you as well without
It's a
pornography?
good question. So that what you just described, that sort of desensitization process, that's for I prescribe that for guys who if a guy can quit cold turkey, then he should.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys struggle to quit cold turkey. Same with really anything. Like with most vices, people tend to have trouble like just quit going from 100 to 0. But I will 100% say if you can do that, by all means, do it. It's the fastest path to where you want to get to. But if a guy has trouble weaning himself off that, then that's what I prescribe. Like you take away like the stimulus to allow your dopamine receptors to get a little bit more sensitive, and in conjunction with that, I also say get the hell off things like TikTok, Instagram Reels, Twitter. Stop eating sugary foods, stop drinking booze, get more exercise. All these, get better sleep. All of these things in conjunction with each other will work to improve the sensitivity of your dopamine receptors. So, to answer the second part of your question, yeah, I think masturbation in general isn't a great hobby for guys to, isn't a great habit for a guy to have. Should he, like, do I understand that occasionally a dude's gonna jerk off? Yeah, occasionally a dude's gonna jerk off. But the problem is, if it's a habitual thing, if it's something he's doing every day, if he has to do it to fall asleep, if he does it because he's bored, like if he's doing it for any of those kind of reasons, then that's a sign of a deeper underlying problem. If he's just like, okay, he's a guy he's not in a relationship, he's a guy who casually dates, he's had a dry spell for a couple of weeks, he's blue ball and it's starting to hurt. Okay, like rub one out and then get back to work. Like, you know, that's not anywhere near. That's not the problem we're talking about. The problem we're talking about is the guy who's like doing it habitually, and typically that comes with pornography, especially like nowadays. I don't think you could. I think it'd be very, very rare for you to find a guy today in today's day and age who was habitually masturbating who wasn't using pornography. Like if he's jerking off all the time and he's just using his imagination, I would be very surprised that man exists today. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know, I read something once, and I tend to gravitate towards things which sometimes don't necessarily have scientific evidence behind it, but it makes sense to me.
Bro science.
Bro science, a little bit. Sometimes I try to keep things science related, but I do gravitate towards that. And I was reading once that, you know, if you imagine about a few hundred years ago, the warriors that existed, could you really picture a Roman gladiator masturbating in his bed, you know? And that masturbation is because we have seen the levels of testosterone decreasing over years. Men's grip strength has decreased, but female grip strength has increased, right? But let's focus on the men here. So men's grip strength is decreasing, testosterone is decreasing, and there are obviously multiple facets that contribute to this. But could you really imagine a Roman gladiator? And it's not just the Romans, right? It's every empire, everybody in history. Men are becoming less masculine, which is very dangerous for society because when men become less masculine, less stoic, they lose control of themselves easier, they're more depressed. Multiple studies show this. But do you feel though that masturbation in itself studies have shown that masturbation is increasing now? And I think one of the reasons for this is that we now live in a world where we've got a roof over our heads, we've got food, we've got comforts of the world, we can travel, we have, the basic necessities to be able to live. Whereas, and this is one of the issues that we get in society, I believe, as well, beyond just the masturbation element, is that when you have too much free time on your hand and things are an option, because it was not an option once upon a time. Once upon a time, you had to go out to get water, you had to feed your family, otherwise they would die, they would perish. But we live in a day and age now where young men in their peak and prime are laying around in bed. They're sitting playing video games and they have a lot of free time because they have the basic necessities. And when men have a lot of free time, one element is they will masturbate. A second element is they will allow their mind to wander. So after the masturbation has taken place, they may lay in their bed, they're relaxed, and then they start thinking about things, letting their mind wander. And depression, I believe a lot of anxiety and depression is self-inflicted. We see this, right? Because your monks of the world, your Buddhas of the world, your religious holy people in the world, people who live up in the mountains, they have nothing, but they remain happy and able to live within themselves. And I believe that depression and anxiety is predominantly internal. And if you can control your internal mindset, your mind frame, then you will live a happy life. If you don't fear the future and don't reminisce too much on the past and live in the present, you live a happier life. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you believe that free time, having these basic necessities that we have today available to us, that this is increasing the rate of masturbation that we're seeing? And do you believe that this is what has helped contribute to the lack of testosterone that we are now seeing in society with men?
I think the hypothesis is correct with the increasing masturbation because of basically creature comforts taken care of. You don't have being comfortable is like the death of a man, in a way. You have to be struggling and striving for something at all times.
I agree.
Otherwise, what do you do? I mean, and you're going to be alone. Like being alone with your thoughts. That's an interesting concept because what do Buddhist monks do? All they do is sit there all day and observe their thoughts. And the kind of if you can't sit there with your thoughts, that actually tells you a lot about yourself because there's something you're not comfortable with about yourself. If you can't stand the idea of sitting there in silence with just your thoughts, that is quite revealing to yourself. That is something you need to do some introspection on, because it means there's something you are unhappy with yourself about, you're unhappy with your life about. There's something that's going on up here that's nagging you that you're not really quite addressing, I think, and you keep pushing it down and shoving it away, distracting yourself, getting on your phone, doing something else, like partying, drinking, whatever the hell, and you're trying to get that thought away from you as much as possible. So you need to confront it and be more present. Does masturbation lead to a decline in testosterone levels? I don't 100% know. What I do know is that I do know that the lack of masturbation will increase it. So I know the reverse is true. So if you no fap, let's say, if you don't jerk off, you basically get an increase in you get an increase in semen volume for a start. I think the first 2 days your semen volume will increase by about 12%, and then in the next 2 days it'll increase by about 8%.
Isn't there sorry to cut you off? Isn't there a sweet point there though where you have where if you don't have a sexual release of some sort, it will start to taper off?
Yeah, basically, there's a point of diminishing returns.
Yes.
With
okay.
it. Yeah. So that's what I just mentioned was talking about semen volume. With testosterone, I believe the peak it increases until about day 7, day 10, somewhere around there. It might even be 10, and then it's sort of it's kind of flatlines. But at day 10, you get this. You do all the way up to like day 7, day 10. You do see a steady increase in testosterone when you don't masturbate and you don't release like that. Not no fap. You might call it.
Okay, let's touch on something very basic here. What are the benefits to having high testosterone levels and why are they necessary for men?
Everything. Cardiovascular health, mental health, joint health, like overall hormonal health, fertility and sexual health. Like everything is better in your life. Talk to any man in his like 40s, 50s who gets onto testosterone replacement therapy and ask him, has anything in your life gotten worse? He'd be like, hell no, everything just got better. Literally everything got better. I think testosterone as like exogenous testosterone has been demonized, and I'll tell you why it's been demonized. In particular, primarily in America, it's because you can't make money off of it. So you can give you. I think there was a study done where administering exogenous testosterone improved ADHD symptoms and improved mental clarity and focus, but you don't make as much money off of exogenous testosterone as you do off Adderall. So in America, they don't prescribe testosterone; they prescribe Adderall to kids and shit. I'm not saying you should give kids testosterone, but I'm saying for adults that have these kind of conditions, for adults who've developed these sort of bad mental problems, or not even mental problems, but
mental health issues.
Well, they've developed due to inflammation in the brain. It has ended up with lack of focus and lack of attention, right? But that testosterone can fix a bunch of these problems, but there's no money in it. There's no profit in it, so they don't promote it and sell it. Instead, they kind of hide it away, push it away, and try to bastardize it. They conflate exogenous testosterone with steroid use, and they deliberately blur the conversation so the average man is misled about it. And the average man, what would they rather you like? It's way more. Okay, if you get testosterone levels right and your hormonal levels right, okay, we're going to get your cholesterol level in check, and we're going to get your heart, your cardiovascular health better. No, it's much better. It's way more profitable if we put you on statins.
Yeah.
Right, cholesterol lowering medication is way more profitable than exogenous testosterone. So there's incentives behind all this stuff. So, I think, and that's not the reason though why the you've seen this consistent decline in testosterone levels year on year on year for I think 60+ years now. There's multiple factors contributing to it. For example, in America, one of the big ones that no one ever speaks of is a pesticide called, I think it's a pesticide or an insecticide called atrazine.
Okay.
Which is literally it's actually outlawed here in Europe. It's completely outlawed because it causes cancer and causes infertility in frogs and shit.
Yeah.
So it literally destroys your sperm cells.
Yeah.
Another big one is estradiol from the birth control pill. The birth control you can almost exactly track the advent of birth control, oral contraceptive hormonal birth control, with the decline in testosterone levels. As more and more women were taking hormonal birth control, more and more of that estradiol has been leaked into the water table because the female's body doesn't absorb all of it. Some of it passes through her urine. It ends up in the water table, and then that will eventually end up in a municipal water supply. And they have done a really good book on this is by Dr. Anthony J. It's called Esterogeneration.
Okay.
It's a fascinating book. I recommend every man read this book. It'll give you a thorough education on all of this.
Yeah.
But they've tested the municipal water supplies in multiple countries around the world, not just Western nations, but everywhere. And they've consistently found estradiol in the water supply, in the tap water, in the shower water. So we are literally drinking birth control. It's not an exaggeration to say.
You think it's purposefully done?
I don't know. I don't think that was. I don't think they could have foreseen that when they made that. But I will say this. I will say that whether or not it was deliberate, they are taking advantage of it. When I say they, who's they? Okay, well, the powers that be, the people who run the fucking world. Who
Okay, so let's come on to something. But before we come onto that next topic, right? Testosterone. I have heard. Not sure if this is true. So trolls, calm down. So obviously, Sterling, you've got a bit of hair loss. I myself,
yes,
lost some hair. I've heard that high levels of testosterone can cause hair loss, so it is a sign of being a man.
It's high levels of DHT.
DHT specific.
Yeah, specifically, which can be a consequence of but it's also a genetic for me. This is my dad's hairline. It's my brother's hairline. It's a genetic receding hairline, man. I've had this my whole life. I'm not thinning. At the back, I don't thin. Yeah. It's just a receding hairline.
It suits you though. You look a bit like Jason. Is it Jason Statham?
I get Jason Statham all the time. Yeah. Honest to God, if I would actually I've considered getting laser surgery to actually laser all my hair off.
Really?
So I don't have to fucking shave anymore.
Yeah, that's a headache.
That saves me. That's how much time does that save me in my life?
I've been. The funny thing is, I used to actually, when I had a full set of hair, a lot thicker, I would still keep my hair short because I would shave it from the sides and keep it short from the top. And in my younger days, I used to have a little flick in there, but a little line in the head back in the day. But it's I think short hair often a time it looks good, and I think as you get older, it suits you more as well.
Oh yeah, like you go to any like meathead gym and you see like the old bald dude who's just a giant man.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, that ain't a bad look.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a good look.
I don't hate that look. Cool,
Yeah.
I'll stick with that.
Yeah.
Like I would prefer that. Like my dad's got like kind of like hair back here and then like nothing here. I'm like, yeah,
No.
I ain't going down that route. Sorry.
So listen. Okay. Very, very interesting thing you said there. There are a lot of guys who let their hair grow from the side. They've lost it completely from the top. They let their hair grow from the side. It's bizarre to me because I try to be self-conscious and looking at myself and what can I do to improve my look. But for some reason, some men think that looks good to have the hair on the side when they've lost it completely on the top.
I don't know. Maybe it's not like I see lots of guys who maybe like in their 60s, 70s rocking that look.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it for anyone else.
I don't know. Maybe a generational thing. I don't know.
Maybe because they're look at it this way. Maybe they saw their granddads do it because their granddad like they didn't have like fashion and fashion advice and hair trimmers and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, what choice do I have? Okay, I'm just gonna let my hair recede. So like, well, granddad did it, so I'll do it. Maybe that's the attitude that 67-year-old guys who are sporting that kind of hair have about it. I'm gonna ask my uncle actually when I see him on Sunday.
So Sterling, I stopped you there because you were going into a territory that I wanted to finish this podcast.
Ah,
on.
interesting. Okay.
So the area that we are talking about is called the Matrix.
Right.
So, the first time I saw you was on an emergency meeting with Andrew Tate. Now, the brothers at the moment, they're in Romania. They have absolutely been making me laugh so badly because I don't find much stuff entertaining. I don't watch sports anymore. I can't remember the last time I saw a good movie, so I don't have much to just de-stress myself like that. Just sitting in front of some rubbish and just watching it. So it's like, what do I watch? So I put on an emergency meeting with Andrew and Tristan, and they have absolutely been giving me these absolute muddy bundle of laughs. And when I'm with my brothers, we watch it. It's hilarious. So talk to me. Firstly, Andrew and Tristan Tate, how did you get to know them?
I met Tristan through Twitter, oddly enough. Then both me and Tristan and me and Andrew started talking on Instagram as well. And then it was during the COVID sort of situation where everything was locked down, and they were bouncing around between a few countries trying to find a place that was sort of open. I think they ended up in Sweden. And I was doing a similar thing. I actually bounced I went from America to England to France to Spain, and I ended up in Portugal. And Portugal was open at that time. And I also went to Morocco. I was kind of just looking to find a place that wasn't full of these retarded laws. And we started talking all about that, and then eventually they ended up out in Las Vegas, and I was back in America at the same time, and they invited me out to an event, so I went out, met up with them, actually the same night I met Andrew and Tristan. I also met Justin Waller. I also met Tig. You might have seen, anyone who watched the most recent emergency meeting, you might have seen Tig out there. A bunch of the War Room guys. I joined basically like immediately after that.
So you joined the War Room?
Immediately after that, I met a bunch of the guys that were like, yep, I want to be a part of these guys. This is an amazing organization. I love what Andrew and Tristan have done. Yeah, that's how I ended up meeting them. Yeah.
So, based on your experience, because you've known them for a bit of time now, and they've got these very severe accusations being put against them, and they could be looking at some significant time in prison on the back of it. Do you believe that they're innocent?
100%. There's zero doubt in my mind. I've hung around these guys behind closed doors, in private, just the boys chilling out, having a laugh. Everyone's speaking openly and honestly. These guys are not criminals. They are not human traffickers. They are not guilty of any of these accusations that people are throwing at them. They're amazing guys. They treat every woman they're with like perfect gentlemen. They have to kick women out of their house. The women are trying, like, whenever we would throw a party or something in their house, the women are trying to stick around, and they're like, look, go. We want to go to sleep. We want to get on with our day. Or we've got work to do. Like, the women are trying to hang around them. They're not it's a logic. There's a massive logical leap you have to make to think. And if you look at the actual accusations, I mean, Tristan talked about this at length. on his emergency meeting. The accusations are from like maybe 2 years ago. I think it's 2020.
Fairly recent, yeah.
Okay, so they were already multimillionaires at that stage. So
Yep.
you have to believe that a couple of multimillionaires, would then go and take money from women's TikToks. I believe that's the actual accusation. That's the actual charge. In order to make money, like and human traffic them to.
There was
make
also
them TikToks.
some grape charges as well.
Yeah, but I believe those ones have actually been dropped now.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
these are the things that were alleged against them.
Oh
though.
yeah, there was,
Yeah.
that is still what the mainstream media is going to purport. They're going to still use those labels. Because that's what this was all about. This was not about justice. This was not about proving someone proving someone guilty of a crime. This was not the purpose of all this stuff against Andrew and Tristan. It was to smear them. It's clearly a smear campaign, because why then is every single mainstream media outlet using the same slurs to describe Andrew and Tristan? You type the names into Google. What do you find? You find sexual assault, rape, human trafficking. You find these words, but you don't find these things about what was his name? Philip Schofield.
Philip Schofield.
Yeah, you don't somehow for some reason you don't find those words when you type him into Google.
But I think this is part of a larger problem that goes beyond Andrew and Tristan historically, because if you go back into history, you will see several people. Some of them got convicted, some of them were innocent. But whenever you go back in history, men who stand up against the status quo per se.
Yes.
I'll give you the best example that I always state is because two people, because I'm a massive fan of both these men, was Michael Jackson and Muhammad Ali. But you also had many other people, and they were slandered in the media. And the larger question here is why? Well, when Muhammad Ali was world champion and he had his title stripped off him, they were going into Vietnam and he stood up against it. He did not want to enlist, and he was a voice for reason, and he was talking against the establishment. Michael Jackson, when did he start getting his name absolutely demolished in the media, particularly within British media? Was in the 90s, when a lot of people don't know that Michael Jackson had a lot of contacts over in Russia, in the Middle East. And when he shot They Don't Care About Us, which all around the world, They Don't Care About Us, his music video, it went to the top of the charts in all countries apart from the United States, where it was predominantly banned on radio stations across the United States. And this is very interesting, right? Tupac Shakur, the list goes on and on and on. And today, because people have such a short-term memory, they forget all this. People forget this. This is recent history, but they forget it. Today, we have Andrew and Tristan Tate and the labels, right? The labels have changed, but now it's misogynist.
Yeah.
Now it's human trafficker, right? And these are the allegations. These are the same labels, just they've changed them a little bit, and they're now applying them to Andrew and Tristan Tate, and I think it's a part of a larger problem historically, which we've seen.
Yeah, and they're doing it because Andrew and Tristan are very, very influential amongst young men, and they're having too much of a positive impact on young men for the powers that be to put up with that. I mentioned, we talked about testosterone levels declining before. We talked about birth control in the water before, and you said, do you think it's deliberate? I said, I don't think that was deliberate, but I do think they like the consequences, and so they're not going to fix the problem. Because what do they like the consequences? They like the consequences of men's testosterone rates declining year on year. So that, what does that mean? You have a populace of men that are far easier to control. They are far better tax slaves. They're more pliable, malleable, more easy to manipulate. Andrew and Tristan have come along. What have they basically told guys? They've told young men, get in shape, work hard, provide for your family, take care of your loved ones, honor your family name, be a man of respect. Like, it's all positive message. But what will that create? That will create a society of young men who are hard to coerce. They're resistant to propaganda. They are harder to manipulate. They are harder to take advantage of by the powers that be, that want a pliant populace of men that they can send into the next war to die, so their stock in Lockheed Martin can increase.
You see, I'm not on that level of, say, a Donald Trump or an Andrew Tate or an Elon Musk, who would have knowledge that I wouldn't have, and I believe that obviously these people who are highly influential in the world do have access to information that you and I perhaps don't. But I find it difficult to believe, though, at the same time, that there is a power that be, like this element of power above us, a matrix per se, an interconnectedness across the world are operating to, because the world is a very complex place. You know, if we're talking about the water systems, we're talking about the media giants, talking about the banking systems. It's a very complicated machine that works. And even the military, all right, if you look at the military, the defense organizations across the world, they're a complicated, it's a very complex machine which runs. And it's not just now, the West versus East. There's different countries. There's a lot of politics going on within the countries. There's a division within the United States. And you'd have to have a lot of people in on it to have a coerced attack. But do you believe that there is this sort of central control unit, which Andrew has labeled as the Matrix?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it's kind of deliberate. I think that is part of the problem, that it is kind of deliberately nefarious and deliberately like ethereal. You can't put your hand on it. You can't figure it. Like, well, who's the dickhead that made the decision to do this stupid stuff?
Who and why?
Exactly, right. So I'll give you an example of like, to kind of address the point you just made. I believe that. I want to get my facts right. So I want to make sure I'm actually using the correct word. I believe they're called ESG scores.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
Let me just make sure I'm doing this correct. ESG score.
So just whilst Sterling is looking for that, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that before I came here today, me and Sterling tagged up, right? And I said, Sterling, what are you wearing? He said, I'm wearing a white t-shirt and black jeans. I said, I'm wearing the same. That's a joke. Coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure environmental, social, and governance. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is what these are called. Yeah. So if I am wrong, I apologize. But there's basically a score that gets applied nowadays. And I think they're called ESG scores. I think that stands for environment, social, and governance. That are applied to businesses when they want to get basically a business loan.
Okay.
So it's basically a score that measures your social justice score. It's like a social credit score.
Sounds like China.
But guess who uses these scores? BlackRock, Vanguard. You know who BlackRock and Vanguard are? BlackRock Citadel is basically the biggest corporation on the planet, which owns. But if you can find, just Google this. Anyone watching, you can look up like, what does BlackRock own, and you'll get this gigantic map of BlackRock Citadel in the middle, and then like Nestle, Kraft, this, like beep, like all of basically every consumer brand on the planet. So they're like a megacorp that buys like percentages of other brands and businesses and stuff. And so they have huge amount of influence over like basically all of corporate America. And they apply what's called these ESG scores when it comes to like they'll give all these companies ESG scores, like basically social credit scores, to validate whether or not they can get bank loans. So like, okay, your Kraft, you need X millions or billions or whatever of dollars to do cash flow every year. So you rely on that loan from the bank and you pay it back, and then like that's how your cash flow works, right? Because it's just such a big corporation. Oh, but you didn't put the LGBTQ plus flag in your bio on Twitter for Gay Pride Month. Oh, your ESG score just went down, so now you can't get a loan.
I didn't know this. Very interesting.
That's why all of these corporations do this same stupid shit. Every time it's Gay Pride Month, they all change their fucking rainbow flags, unless that company's bios in Saudi Arabia, they don't change it then. But that's why they do it. That's why they all support like Black Lives Matter rallies and protests and the riots that were going all over like America, burning shit to the ground. They would put like the logos of that in there because they get ranked on these ESG scores, and that's what companies like BlackRock said, they'll give them those rankings, and then they can, I believe I get that part correct, and then they basically dictate whether or not they can get the cash flow for the business loans. So it's this weird, like, it's this weird system, this weird cycle where everyone is kind of like intertwined in it now, and they can't really get out of it because they need like these corporations these massive like family name corporations are so big that they kind of need to work in this system to keep the business running, to keep the cash flow going. It's this weird scenario we've ended up in.
I think there's a two two sides to this coin. One is what you're talking about, which is on the corporations. You have these external influences, such as these ESG scores, which you're talking about, which is very interesting. I didn't know about this. But you reminded me of stuff that I used to look at about 8 years ago, where I'd be looking at them Bilderberg groups, looking at Disney, what they own, different who has funded what campaign. But there's another element here, is when you actually work for these corporations internally, there is a press to help represent all different communities. So for example, in the United Kingdom, and I think this is a good thing, is that within a company, you have different people from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different religions, different sexual preferences, and everyone's got their belief systems. And then what happens is there is a push to have equality in the company. So the companies try to embody that equality component and making sure that everybody is heard, understood, and represented. But do you feel that we've gone too far with that?
Totally. Like we've prioritized like equality over competence.
100%. But can I go? Let me just cut you though. I'm playing devil's advocate here. This is not my opinion. I'm just telling you.
Right.
Do you know who else also where this was also mentioned? And it really sticks out to me. Have you ever seen the movie American History X? And they sat on the
I
table.
have seen that.
In American History X, it is his father who mentions this, that when I am a police officer, I don't want a black guy next to me because he's black. I want him there because he is the best person for the job.
Right.
But that's what leads that young man, forget his name, the actor, to go on the rampage that he goes on, and he gets that black guy on the pavement, puts his teeth onto that pavement,
curb stomps him.
and boom, curb stomps him and goes on this rampage and gets to jail. And that's the whole point of American History X. So what they're portraying there is this. And think about it, American History X is quite an old movie, but they were portraying that ideology then led on to his son going down that rampage that he went on.
Yeah. But it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, Martin Luther King was the one who said, like, judge me on the content of my character, not the color of my skin. He started the whole what would you call it? The Emancipation Revolution, not the Emancipation Proclamation. Sorry, that was Lincoln. What would you call it? That cult. I can't remember what the name of the revolution was in America, where they allowed the blacks to vote in America.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever Martin Luther King led, whatever that movement.
But this is what Trump is now bringing in versus Joe Biden, right? We're going a bit political here, but Trump is bringing this back where Trump is saying, look, best person for the job. And a woman asked him, if you become president of the United States, will I get the same rights as a man? Will I get the same pay? And his answer back to that was, if you do a good job, then you will.
Yeah. I don't see, I personally, if look, let me put myself in a weird situation. Let's say if I was like a black gay man and I got given a job to meet a diversity quota, I would feel insulted. If I knew I got hired just to tick a diversity box on their hiring quota, I'd be like I'd feel like I didn't earn that job. Like I would have rather been hired because I'm the best guy for the job. Rather than like, oh, we need to hire a gay guy, we need to hire a black guy, we need to hire an Indian guy, a Pakistani guy, we got to hire a Chinese guy, we got to hire blah 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 blah. And it's like, okay, well, like I get the point. I understand the idea of like we want everyone to have to feel like they're welcome and they can achieve things. Like, you don't want people to think like, oh, you don't want a young kid who's from a certain any ethnic group to be like, oh, I could never do that. I could never achieve that. I could never be an engineer. I could never be a pilot.
But the reason this was brought in was because you have people in them positions who will pick based on, and this is true, if somebody, there's a study which took place and it proved that if your name is David, in comparison to a more complicated name, they will default to David because they're familiar with that person. So this tries to these ideologies try to combat that. But I will say, because I'm coming across like I disagree with you. I agree with you. I'm naturally, innately now more of a capitalistic person, where I think best man for the job. Yeah, I agree. Or woman.
Because I think everyone wins when you have the best people for the job, creating like amazing products, amazing businesses, doing amazing service. Well, what does that lead to? It leads to a better functioning society, better quality products, better quality services, better quality businesses, with better customer service, and every aspect of society underneath that, like the knock-on ramifications of that efficiency and of that of that that high skill demand, everyone benefits from it. So, okay, maybe, like, and I'm not an engineer, like, but I want the best engineers at Twitter.
Agreed.
Like, I don't care who they are. I don't care where they come from. Just pick the best guy. And I like what Elon Musk did for an example, how he fired like thousands of people, and like the core group is like under 100 or something now.
High functioning individuals.
Yeah, just pick the best. But that tells you how much. Like, and I guarantee you, most Silicon Valley companies are like Twitter was, where there's just going to be thousands of basically useless employees who are just middle management, pontificating around, taking a paycheck, sucking money out of the company, and not actually adding anything of real value that the customer wants from the product or from that company. So I think what Elon Musk did is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Like, cool, come in, get rid of all the useless employees, pick the ones that do an amazing job. I don't care what their background is. I don't care what their ethnicity is. I don't care what their sex is. Because then now, what do we all have? Now we all have an actual platform that has free speech, thanks to Elon taking over Twitter. So we've all just benefited from this.
Stay off Instagram threads, guys. Stay on Twitter.
Oh yeah. I'll mention that. When's this dropping? Will we have enough time to save people? Is what I want to know. Will we have enough time to save?
Give it 120 seconds. Go on.
Yeah. So the way IG Threads works is it links to your Instagram account, and let's say, for example, and IG Threads is already incredibly heavy on the censorship. So if you say something too controversial on Instagram Threads, they'll delete your Instagram Threads, which will consequently delete your Instagram account. That's the way it's run right now. So if you support Elon and don't go on Threads,
you'll be all right with your images because they're easier, right? It's a bit more difficult, right? Putting up an offensive image unless you've put up a nude picture or something, right? I don't know, that goes against the policies. But when you're talking shit on Twitter, it's not easy. You might say something that you could get banned for, right? And you might not realize it that what I'm saying is against the status quo, against the matrix, but it could be. And Instagram will silence your ass and they'll get rid of your Instagram.
Yeah.
Sterling, it's been fantastic speaking to you. I want to finish off though on that topic about companies. I think you are definitely correct. I do agree with you, but I think the solution is very difficult. I think that we do need to get a balance in the West between because America particularly, United Kingdom not as much as the United States, but has had a particular problem with racism in the different states, depending on where you are historically. But I think that's also because the United States is a newer country in comparison to the United Kingdom, which has a very old culture, but that's for another conversation. But I think it's very difficult to measure, is a company not employing someone due to them not being the best person for the job, or is it a racial bias? So I think it's a difficult balance there. But the problem that we have here is that if we don't do something quick, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, I'm not saying all these countries are bad, Dubai, they will kick our ass in the next 5 to 10 years. You will start to see the G20 will completely flip on its head. The United Kingdom is already losing. Europe and the United States are losing their power. And the reason is these things that we are discussing today is why I believe China and the East are taking over, and we have absolutely no idea what they're going to be like. But we have seen with China what they have done, right, with different minorities. And I don't want to live in a world where China is the main superpower.
No, I would kind of agree with that. Have you heard the BRICS thing?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I saw something today where they're talking about what's the BRICS currency going to be and what's it going to be backed by. I've seen two different stories. One was talking about BRICS, the BRICS currency being backed by Bitcoin, and I saw another one today, the BRICS currency being backed by gold. Bringing back a gold standard.
Don't worry, man. We'll bring Bitcoin in, man. Bitcoin's the future anyway.
I'm not afraid of the Bitcoin standard. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole BRICS scenario is a very, very interesting one that's playing out. China's an interesting situation because they're like, I do not want a Chinese, a global Chinese controlled.
No, I don't trust it.
Surveillance state. I don't trust that.
I'd pick Joe Biden over that.
Yeah, they're horrible.
Yeah.
In terms of how totalitarian they are towards their citizens, social credit scores, things like this. You're aware of. But China has an interesting problem where they have an aging population. They don't have their birth rate curve is weird, so they don't actually have China's going to be in real trouble in like 10 to 20 years' time because they do not have enough people.
They reversed the other way around, didn't they, with that policy that
Yeah.
they put in?
Yeah, so China's in a weird situation. I actually don't have a clue what's going to happen. I'm not. I think China knows that.
It's
Which
not-
is why
it's-
they're building so much infrastructure in like Africa and other places
It's
around the
not
world.
just China though, is it? Right? It's Russia as well.
Really?
It's Saudi Arabia. It's Dubai. It's Kazakhstan. It's India. The wealth is shifting
Hmm.
and power is shifting over east now.
Yeah.
The vast majority of our infrastructure that exists in the west is now slowly shifting over to the hands of businessmen in the east, and they are taking over in every respect, financially, property, real estate, everything that you can think of is now being swallowed up by the east.
Hmm.
So it's a very difficult thing to combat, and the world is unforgiving, I think. And unless we fix our problems that we were discussing earlier in the West, I think that we're going to lose through simple competition.
I would agree with that. Yeah, 100%. I think we're definitely on the back foot in a lot of areas.
I'm not saying all these countries are bad. I'm just saying we don't know what these countries are going to be like when they have the power of the world in the palm of their hand.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think America was particularly nice when it had the power of the world in the palm of its hand. It spent a lot of money on drones blowing up innocent people in the Middle East.
Agreed. But they say, right, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know.
That is true.
And I don't think the United States has done everything bad. I think they've done a lot of good in the world, and there are a lot of laws in place in the United States which, I do agree with, and I really am an advocate for the way the United States was set up, and the West generally. We have a lot here to be grateful for, because it's not until you lose something that you know what you've got. And I'm born in the UK, and I'll always be a massive advocate for the Western society that we have, good or bad. It's proven, it's worked, but I think it's up to us to make it better and stop it shifting into crazy world.
I would agree with that. Yeah, birthplace of the Magna Carta, right here.
Absolutely, there's a lot. We could go on and on and on, and list everything the West has created, and the East would not compare. But having said that, if you go back into ancient history, East created a lot as well. But Sterling, thank you very much. Interesting talk. A lot of different topics.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Thank you for having me on, man. That was great.
Thank you very much, guys. Make sure you follow Stirling Cooper. Sterling, where can they get a hold of you? Just tell them again.
Yeah, stirlingcooper.com. Or if you go onto YouTube, you just type in Stirling Cooper. I'm the first thing that comes up. And I have a ton of free resources on my YouTube channel for all the various topics we've just talked about. I actually cover a lot of stuff on testosterone, and I cover a lot of stuff on detoxifying the body, as well as boner problems, bedroom advice. I actually cover quite a lot now.
Try the boner shake, guys. That's free, right?
Try boner
You've got it right here. Thank you very much. Be Real TV. We're out. Happy with that, brother?
That was awesome, bro. Love it.